Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. We'll have our second presentation from Cassie.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for coming. I really do appreciate it. And I have to just start with a little bit of a personal note. I'm a little nervous to begin with, so please bear with me a little. My background, and I'm going to tell, you'll see why I'm going to tell you this, but I'm not anti-God or anti-religion at all. In fact, I grew up in a conservative Christian home and really strapped on to what my mother taught me for a lot of years of my life. In fact, out of high school, I went to Bible school. I went to seminary for 4 years, and then I was a pastor in a church for 3 years. So I do care a lot about these things. This is a topic for me that I've spent a lot of personal time and thought on, and which is what led me to this paper. This was not a topic I just picked because I needed something to write about, but these are questions for myself that I've been searching and looking at for, honestly, almost 10 years probably. Which begs my age a little bit, but that's okay. So to begin with, I'm going to go a little bit backwards from my paper. I gave my definition of true religion at the end, and it's even at the end of my PowerPoint, but I need to start. I'd like to say why this is important, why I care about this, and why I guess I feel like everyone else should care about this too. Religion for me has seemed, and while I was even practicing ministry, has seemed, well, I'm just going to flat out say it. I felt like we made God too human, too small, and almost too personal. And even while I was ministering, I always had these feelings. And I felt like, as a minister, I didn't like, this is the truth, how much sway I had in people's lives. And a lot of what I was saying was just my opinion and my thoughts on God. And you would find people moved by the most simple statements, and that always bothered me. I didn't want to be in the business of manipulation, maybe not intentional manipulation, but a form of what I felt like was manipulation, and watching people make decisions in their lives based on, because I spouted something that I claimed I heard from the Lord. So those things always bothered me. Of course, there were topics that always bothered me. I steered clear of certain things that rubbed me wrong, like hell, and the idea of a loving God doing something like that. I mean, these were problems I had way before I stepped out of ministry. So, not to be too long-winded, in my own private life, I narrowed it down, I felt, not to a strict answer, but almost to no answer, where I feel like I really can't know anything about God, for sure. There's nothing that I know with certainty about Him. There's things that I'd like to think are true. There are things that bring maybe peace and comfort to me, but I don't know them. And then I read Hume, and I found a home for my own thoughts. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about comes from Hume's writings, but they allowed me almost a voice behind what I was already thinking and feeling. So to begin with, I actually, Dr. Drapkin, going over my paper, I didn't explain who David Hume was. I mean, this is just sort of fun. It's pictures of David Hume. But the point I wanted to show is when he lived. I've actually had a couple people that have read the paper ask me, because it's not in there, and I was supposed to put it in there, and I forgot. So he lived, obviously, 1711 to 1776. So I've already had somebody read the paper, and they were thinking he was around in the 1940s. I said, oh, that's my mistake. So this is sort of a clarification of who David Hume is. He's a Scottish philosopher, and we're going to discuss a little bit of what he had to say on religion. To begin with, when I use the term religion today, just religion in general, I want you to think of it in general. I am talking about religion, how we think of God, what we think of Him, our ideas of Him. I mean, that's religion. What you practice all the time. And they're a natural religion and revealed religion. And they're kind of on different sides. Revealed religion is more probably what you would think of a little bit more, what is known through revelation in Scripture. Might be why we go to church and what we go to hear, what we believe. Natural religion is what is known through reason and ordinary experience. Opinion of God or faith based on the natural world and what you see, and then what you take from that. Now, the reason I bring up natural religion, it's not what we usually always think of, but in Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, written by Hume, published in 1779 after his death, by the way, he talks about natural. This is a whole book entirely dedicated to natural conversation between three men discussing religion. You've got the skeptic. His name is, I still don't know for sure how to, Philo or Philo. I say Philo, I don't know if I'm right. But, and then Demea, which we won't discuss a lot about Demea today. And then Cleanthes, which is like the believer. You know, maybe we would even think of a Christian today, but he's the religious guy in the book. So a lot of the discussion is between Cleanthes and Philo, and their disagreements, actually. Not to get in too much huge detail, but this is a real basic. In fact, this is Cleanthes saying similar effects and for similar causes. It can be inferred that God's mind is similar to the mind of man because what is created is similar. I'll stop there for just a second. It can be inferred that God's mind is similar to the mind of man because what is created is similar. What Cleanthes is saying is, in his defense, is that when you look at the universe and you look at the world, it's like a great big machine. It all runs smoothly. It's interconnected properly. We're amazed at the intricacies, the detail. It's phenomenal, which it is. I mean, I don't think there's any of us in here that would deny that. And then, you can then take that and infer that, well, similar effects and for similar causes, that if the world is like that, then God must be like that because God created the world, and now, it goes back. So man creates art or creates a machine, and God does the same when he created the universe. I hope that makes some sense. Okay. So, therefore, we can claim to understand a part of the nature of God because our minds are alike. That's the basic argument of the argument from design. God is like man. Problems with the argument from design. Now, Philo points out quite a few, but I'm really just going to pick out 4. I'm going to take this one off.
If you want.
Okay. So there's 4 problems. He first of all points out that there's a simple logical difficulty with this argument, and that is that the leap is large. You're going from the creation of, he even uses examples of a building or a watch or a boat that you've crafted, or you're going from the creation of a man and then jumping to then comparing the creation of the universe. And that's a large leap between the two. And then he points out, which I feel like is the biggest argument here, honestly, that it puts the deity on our level. That it makes it, you've kind of assumed that God has a similar mind to the mind of man, and that connection is just a little too close. He gives an alternative idea, and I don't want to spend too much time on this. I mean, these are things, if you'd like to ask when the question and answers come up, I'd be happy to. But the important one is that the idea that we're putting God on an area where we think we can understand him. We're making him very comprehensible. And in some of Hume's writings, these writings particularly, especially through the character of Philo, which I forgot to point out, many scholars assume that Philo is kind of Hume's voice in the dialogue because of his familiarity with Hume's other writings on this topic. So a lot of what I'm saying comes from the character Philo, but it's assumed by many scholars that it's Hume's own words, or thoughts, I should say. But the real problem is the idea that it's making God so understandable. So, on this next writing, it's an essay written by Hume called Of Superstition and Enthusiasm. Now, I like this writing a lot. When I first read it, it was like, bingo, this is it. This hits the emotional aspect of religion, is really what we're talking about here. Now, it's very hard for me to just stick to what Hume had to say because I feel like the ties are so close to what we see in religion now in our Western society. And of course, I can't peel away just the argument from my own thoughts here because I feel like I saw it in religion all the time. On one side, we'll begin with superstition. These are two different parts of religion. All humans have this natural tendency at some point in life, some more than others, for some, fear, feelings of melancholy, sadness. I mean, at some point every person will feel these things. It's a typical human condition. Some feel it a lot more than others, and some live in it all the time. And the idea here is that religion plays on that. There's a lot of fear. I used to say this even when I was a minister. Church is built on guilt, fear, and shame. People attend out of one of those 3 things. And this plays into that. There's an emotional part where we feel the need to be right with God, right with God. So we practice religion in a certain fashion. And there's a lot of fear. There's fear of being wrong. I mean, well, eternal damnation is a huge fear, or, anything like that. Another thing about superstition, it's favorable to priestly power. I kind of mentioned this previously. I never liked the part about when you tell people you're a minister and then your opinion is elevated suddenly, as if you know something. And when you say, something maybe even that you personally learned about something while you were reading scripture or whatever, all of a sudden becomes a standard by which everybody should live by. People are swayed. I used to say this too. There's a certain measure of us, and I don't know exactly where that comes from. There's a part of us that does. I mean, maybe that's why we're here today. We search for something. We're talking about philosophy. We're interested in spiritual things or religion or all of these items. So there's already that natural part built in, and then someone who is maybe given easily to superstition is very swayed by priestly power. So, I mean, we could go into tons of examples. But also he points out that superstition is an enemy to civil liberty. People stop thinking for themselves when they dive really far into a religious practice. There's a lot of times that, this isn't the case, of course, for everybody, but that your own personal opinions may fly out the window because you're taking on the opinions of religion, because of fear, melancholy, superstition. And I love this quote by Hume, because he wraps it up, the very last sentence when he's writing about this. Weakness, fear, melancholy, together with ignorance, are therefore the true sources of superstition. The ignorance part also playing an important role. Enthusiasm, on the other hand, you're talking about those that are maybe even the leaders in religion. Excited, feel like they're close to God, have an idea of what they're supposed to be doing, claim to hear from God, claim to feel that they carry God with them everywhere they go. You'll hear his presence. I feel his presence all the time. There's a certain presumption that I have a closeness with God, a confidence in being special with God. All of these things play a part in that, and that's what he calls enthusiasm. So not necessarily enthusiasm like I'm excited about it, but just enthusiasm of I've got it, and I want to share it with you, and I want it to change your life. It's changed mine, or on the other hand, it can be used on a bat. It could be used as manipulation. Anyway, it's a strong confidence. He says here, hope, pride, presumption, a warm imagination, I like that part, together with ignorance are therefore the true sources of enthusiasm. The third writing of Hume's I'd like to talk about is his article called Of Miracles. This one is more technical than the other ones. There's a lot of arguments built into this one argument. And again, in question and answer, I'd be happy to go back and maybe get pretty detailed into that, and I also find this the hardest part. I got it in my head. It's harder for me to articulate this one, so again, bear with me a little bit. But I feel we'll start with the terms proofs and probabilities. Hume talks about that in life, in our everyday actions, we develop a sense of what's going to happen when we do certain things. I can pick up this paper. If I drop them, they're going to spread across the floor. I know that's going to happen because I've maybe done it before. It's obvious. We all know it's going to happen because when we drop something, it falls. And we've given that now, that's a proof. It's solid. We expect it. We would be floored if it was going to do something different. The truth is they would happen. They would drop to the floor. So proofs are kind of the sure thing. Not kind of, they are the sure thing. Probabilities are something that have a chance of not actually happening. It's probable. It's pretty simple. It may or may not happen. I may wad up a piece of paper and throw it across the room. Maybe it'll make it as far as Tim. Maybe it'll only drop right here at the floor. Who knows? We could weigh a lot of things. We could decide whether the wind here is going to have something to do with it. There's different options that could happen. I thought of my car today. I've been having car trouble, and I thought, usually you put your key in, and my car usually starts. But there's always a small probability something could go wrong and it's not going to start. That's a probability. Now, the proportional approach deals with these probabilities, is really the bottom line. Proofs are proofs. They're pretty settled. The probabilities, it's like a weight. You decide which one you think is really going to happen based on the evidence that weighs more on that side. So my car, for an example, usually I do put my key in, everything runs smoothly. So most of the weight would go on the side that my car is going to run fine today. But there is, a couple weeks ago, I tried to drive it, and I'm sputtering down the street, and something was wrong with it. So there is also a little weight on the other side, but the probability weighs on the side of everything being fine. And that's the side today. When I go home tonight, I'm going to put my key in my car, and I'm going to assume it's probably going to start because most of the proof and most of the evidence falls on that side. So this is how, I hope that's a good example, this is how probability works. And that's how the proportional approach works. So, on the issue of miracles, that proportional approach is how Hume says you should weigh the idea that a miracle has taken place. Miracles, by definition, are a violation of the laws of nature. They're a violation of a proof. So already, the odds are highly stacked against a miracle ever occurring. He uses the example literally of someone seeing someone else being raised from the dead. He talks about, I think this is the perfect example. Of course, it's the biggest, one of the biggest miracles we can imagine. But the truth is, he weighs it against this. Which is more probable? That the man who's telling you that he saw someone raised from the dead, that somebody was actually raised from the dead? Or is it more probable that the man telling you this is somehow deceived, or maybe misinformed, or his eyes failed him somehow? I mean, which one's more probable? Well, we all know it's more probable the guy was deceived and somehow misinformed. And so Hume is saying, you always put your weight on the side with the more probability. Well, for every miracle, there's always a huge weight of probability on the side saying that the miracle does not happen. Hume never comes out and just says, miracles don't happen, they never happen. He's just saying it is highly, highly unlikely that a miracle could ever take place, really. Now, like I wrote on here, there are 4 reasons. He gives really 4 solid reasons why he thinks miracles are unlikely, and again, I'd be happy to talk about them. They have to do with, if you'd like, I can talk about those. That's no problem. So how does this affect religion? Well, most religions are built on some form of a miracle. And without those miracles, really, sometimes there's not much left. So, it's a hard-hitting punch at the foundation of religion in a big way. This is Hume's, my mixture of Hume's summaries on religion. These, to me, are the biggest things that have been pulled out of these articles. First of all, most religions humanize. This was always been my problem anyway. Make God like a man. Honestly, give God human attributes and think of God like a man. And I say this, when you think of details, I have like a flood of stuff going through my head where, the people I've known over the years that are so afraid of being wrong because of punishment from God, or, so afraid to, make decisions because what if it's not God's will, things like this. And in my thought, that is making God like a human that you're trying to follow and guess what they're thinking all the time. That's not very godlike to have to worry about all that. He brings up the emotional aspects, superstition and enthusiasm. We put a lot of feeling into this. We're human, and we have natural tendencies. Since we're human, we have natural tendencies to fear at times. We have natural tendencies to pride at times, and religion plays on those things, uses those. And then miracles versus deception. I've never seen a miracle. I've heard a lot of people claim to see miracles, and I've been around religion most of my life, and I've heard a lot of claims, and I've never seen a single one. It's not just about my opinion. I'm just saying I feel like the probability of a miracle actually happen is extremely low, if even possible at all. This is sort of my definition of religion here at the bottom. I feel like religion is simply this. It's an idea of God and how he interacts with mankind. And the major word here is idea. That's all religion really is, after summing all this up. It's an idea of God. And I wrote in my paper that I know for a lot of people, including myself at times, there's a certain comfort in an idea of God, but really that's what this is, an idea of God. God is really not human. He's incomprehensible. And I use the word God. In fact, in my paper, I stuck with words like deity and supreme being because I'm not really sure even exactly if you can, God comes with so many ideas behind it, but there's, I personally do think there is the existence of this being is maybe not so questioned in my mind as the fact that I don't think it's as personal or as knowable as we think that it is. Now, Hume does mention, he actually uses the phrase true religion, but he never fully defines it. So what I've done here is I've really taken Hume's writings, I studied them on religion, and I came down to, I really believe that this would be the definition of true religion. It would begin mostly and most importantly with humility. And what I mean by that is, I used to say this all the time too when I was in ministry. Well, when I first started coming out of ministry, you just wanted to hear sometimes a Christian say that they could be wrong. Not necessarily that they are wrong, but just that it's possible they don't have a corner on the truth. And I'm not just Christians, I know this is, but this is what we spend most of our time around. And sometimes that's all I wanted to hear. You don't have to throw out everything you believe, but just that idea that maybe you're just not right, maybe you don't have the whole thing. And the real truth is, you really don't know for sure. Sometimes that's all I wanted to hear. Not that I've heard it yet or anything, and actually I've stopped looking for it. It doesn't matter to me anymore. But humility to me is an acceptance that the Supreme Being is higher than our minds can go. We cannot know him or understand him. That's that humility. And tied in with that, and I didn't put this up here, but in my paper, is that faith then becomes a choice. So if you choose to practice a certain religion, you choose to believe it, just acknowledge it for what it is, which is a choice of yours. That's your choice to make that idea of God that's what you'd like God to be. But you don't know it for sure. That's all this whole thing is about, really, is right here. Hume ties in also, I love this quote because these are his words. The proper office of religion is to regulate the heart of men, humanize their conduct, infuse the spirit of temperance, order, and obedience. It enforces the motives of morality and justice. And I love all these things, especially humanize their conduct, infuse the spirit of temperance. It's very much Humean to be very open to others and kind-hearted. And, I knew when I put morality on there, I'm not diving into a specific guideline of morality. But Hume narrowed, when he put the office of religion, part of it is morality. I feel like that's very important. Okay, I think that's it for now. Yes.
Can you say a little bit about what difference, if any, there is between true religion as you define it, as you understand it, and agnosticism? That is just the view that who the heck knows?
Right.
There may be an all-powerful being. There may not.
Actually, it's probably very.
Question, please.
Yeah.
What's the difference between true religion and agnosticism?
Well, in all reality, they're very similar, to tell you the truth. I mean, I wouldn't say there's a. Because part of the true religion is the humility, just saying. Here's the difference, though, I would say. Let me think about this. Think about it a second. In agnosticism, or at least the agnostics that I've known and when I've studied it, there's always that disconnection from any type of spiritual or religious activity, usually because they don't really see that that's, of any importance. In true religion, and I barely touched on this, but I still think somebody could be involved in a religious activity, and it could be very meaningful to them, or it could be something where but they're understanding that that is their choice, their tool to connect with God, maybe, but it's not necessarily your connection or your connection or your connection. So maybe in terms it's not a far spread from agnosticism, but I feel like, and maybe not all agnostics are like that, I don't know. It's just the agnostics I do know. And I've even felt at times maybe I am an agnostic, but the truth is I do care about these things still. And I feel like, I do certain things that are spiritually connected to God for me, but they're not what I think the only connection to God or the truth, or I found something great and special. In fact, some of it could just be, it's just my idea. It's in my own head. It's in my own mind. Honestly, it's my own idea. It really may not be God at all. It just might be my mind feeling like it's God. There's the difference. Maybe the difference of caring or accepting that there could be a little something there. Yeah.
I noticed, and I haven't read it completely, but I looked at some of your quotes because I wanted to figure out how Hume, you know, if you believe this idea that God is unknowable, how do you address God? What is God? And here I'm talking about gender. You used, I noticed that in the writing he used the deity.
Right.
And I don't know if it's different throughout. I was wondering, you know, what does he use to address the gender of God? And does he even say, and I'm doubting it because he's an enlightened philosopher, but does he even entertain the possibility that it could be a woman or non-gender?
Right, right. No, good question, because actually I always have a hard time. That's kind of when I brought up that I said I even stay away from the word God because of everything that, the whole package deal that comes with that. And yeah, Hume doesn't use the word God a lot either. And actually throughout my paper, I don't even know if I use, maybe once or twice even refer to the term God. I don't, because of what comes with that term. He, for me, personally, was just a simple way of doing it without, you know, when I needed it, then I would use it. Hume, I don't remember any gender-related, I mean, he doesn't address, you know, female, male, what it is. It's more of, well, in fact, I was discussing with someone today, you know, we might even at times use the word force or, you know, the universe or, I mean, there's so many other terms, and I stayed away from those two and stuck more with what Hume used because, you know, supreme being, divine or deity. Those things aren't, he never does specifically address that. He just doesn't. Or that I've read. I haven't read everything either, but I've never come across that. And yeah, I myself try to stay away too for that same reason, because we don't know. We don't know. Does that answer? Yeah.
It seems to me you took the deism of the time period,
Mm-hmm,
the God overarchingly transcendent, somewhat inaccessible,
right.
and ecumenicalized it a little bit, saying, you know, I really can't know if you're actually reaching God or what, but, you know, it's good for you, and,
Right.
it's what you need, and to whatever extent you actually are accessing whatever little part of God is human-like, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised I don't object more to what you've said here, but at the same time...
Tim, me too.
At the same time, the one thing if I had Steve Trevor here, I might go into the miracles thing, but the emotional aspect of religion, which I find so pivotal, you seem to think that the whole fear, superstition versus enthusiasm, that these things are somehow both core issues. That religion feeds the one and produces the other. Am I right?
Yeah, that's a good way to say it, I think.
So what would you say to somebody who says the point of religion is not to feed fear and superstition, at least broadly construed, but to try to get rid of it, to try to resolve it, and that's why it produces something like that?
Say that very last part again. So you're saying...
That you produce enthusiasm by getting rid of fear.
Okay. So you're asking if, what do you say about religion wanting to alleviate fear, not meaning to produce it, and then the byproduct is maybe the enthusiasm part?
What you would see in a large-scale Pentecostal church or in a Sufi Muslim community,
Right.
That's what I'm thinking.
Right. I think both of those things, superstition and religion, or enthusiasm both, are not, for the most part, probably intentional on anybody's parts. I mean, I feel like they kind of become natural parts of religion. I don't think, maybe, actually, most of the ministers that I know would never want to produce fear in anyone. And they would never, in a million years, have that desire to cause someone to fear. Well, I shouldn't say that, actually. Sometimes in hell and damnation sermons, those are intended to be fearful. Scratch that comment. That does happen. But for the most part, I think they wouldn't mean to play on that part of humanity. But religion in general, when you talk about exclusivity, the possible of any kind of punishment or damnation of any kind, those things, don't they naturally produce some fear? I mean, that's how I would view. I mean, there's some that naturally makes you want to protect your soul. There's some fear played into that. And again, maybe not on purpose all the time, but it seems to be a natural byproduct, I think. And so is I think the other part is too, the enthusiasm. I think it's a natural byproduct. You have this so-called, experience with God, and you felt something great, and now all of a sudden you feel this connection with God, and you have a little bit of, maybe not, you're not meaning to be arrogant, or you're not meaning to think of yourself, to put yourself on a higher level, but you kind of feel that way a little bit, like, I'm connected with God now. I have this part of me. I think they're natural byproducts. I don't know if they can be avoided. Yeah.
Is there, in your view, a place for prayer?
That's a
in
great
true
question.
Oh, you want that question?
That's a great question.
Well,
I don't know if I can answer it, but I love the question because this is a personal issue for myself. I mean, I have a dear friend of mine that we talk about this stuff a lot, and both of us, I find myself thinking like this, but I still find myself praying at times, in my heart or in my mind.
What do you pray?
Oh, it's a thought usually to God, and it's addressed to God. This is funny. Before I came here today, I talked to my mom, and she said, "Are you nervous?" "Yes, I'm nervous." "Well, let me pray for you." And I said, "Okay." And right there on the phone, she prays for me, and and she's addressing, God and Jesus and the whole gamut right there. And I don't have a.
With you listening in?
I'm listening.
She
Yes.
was praying to you.
No. No, she's praying to God for me at that time. Okay, here's. That is a hard question, and I grapple with it in my own. I think about this a lot, actually. I find comfort in prayer, but I don't think it does anything.
Can I was leading to something, okay? Because I could imagine someone saying that you're in transition, is what you
Right.
are.
Oh, I've been told
You're
that.
in transition. You're getting over something.
Right.
You're getting over religion. And what you're calling true religion now, in the future, you're just going to call something like, I don't know, being good, being loving, being wise, I don't know, something like this. That you'll find yourself, should you have children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews and all, entrusted in your care, maybe not, family now. But anyway, you'll be loving towards them or something like this, but you won't get on your knees and pray with them. You won't have blessings and this and that. And well, in other words, see, all right. As you said in your paper, he was accused in his day of being an atheist and a skeptic, and he was also, he was a literary man. He was accused of being a crafty writer, someone who will gingerly put you in a place where religion will dissolve, basically. That he was an atheist, he's what you were saying he was. He was a good guy and stuff. And he's willing to call this true religion because it's sure a lot better than Church of Scotland or whatever.
Right.
The people who are calling him satanic and what do they call him? He was bad news, though.
Yeah.
In his day, he got himself in personal trouble, and he didn't get a university position, by the way, over his religious views, which he wanted, coveted, in fact.
Well, part of the reason it wasn't public, it was
yeah. So
published
anyway,
by
I'm
students.
wondering if you can think this through, and it's hard to predict. You've only been 10 years on this project. Give it another 20. Where will you be, I wonder? And will you call it religion, or will this just be good riddance to bad rubbish or something? It's a difficult question I'm asking, but this question about prayer, this is where it begins.
Right.
Someone will say, and I wonder why call it religion at all? If you're going to suspend judgment, why not just call it being loving, being whatever the good slide was it? I forget what this. You don't talk about it, right?
This one? Or
No, not that one.
the next one?
Keep going.
Yep, this one. Humanizing
No,
their
keep going, because he says the proper office of religion, but arguably we can dump religion. Or maybe that's all we need.
Yeah, this is the one.
You'll be temperate, orderly, obedient only to whom you judge to be worthy of your obedience. You'll be moral, you'll be just. And God, well, makes for good stories.
Well, I think the only thing I can think of when you were talking that makes it different for me is that I do think there is some form of a God, and And I do say some form because I don't know that for sure. I don't have a problem with if somebody might believe there's not a God. That's, because we don't know. And I think that there is. And I think that's why I would call it religion now. And maybe in 20 years, I guess I don't know.
Not a fair question, I should say. But of course, Hume, when everyone's gone, might go to you and, over a nice Scotch whiskey or something, who knows what, ask you, well, I understand how you were raised. I was raised the same way,
yes.
curiously, but I got over it, and Hume would say perhaps. And to say that you believe, well, there's a story to be told behind that. I mean, there were impressions of all that gave rise to your ideas, but where are you getting this? Except by hearsay. In other words, miracles, or allegations of miracles, in fact, ultimately. I mean, it has reverb. These things don't shake easy. Hume supposedly spoke with a Scotch accent, a nice burr in his voice and stuff like that. I imagine that doesn't shake easy, although I gather he tried in certain companies to become I mean, so in other words, religion is like a Scottish burr.
Right.
It might
Title of
be
your next book.
religion. It's like a Scottish burr.
Sorry.
I don't know. See, this is the thing that folks will wonder about. That that it really has it's caught cast adrift, and his contemporaries. I mean, sort of is that. And its death knell came in the next century when the last little shreds of it. I mean, the argument for design, maybe you don't get what do you call it? A mind like humanity, but you have some sort of mind up there. Something at least is making the animals come out with their feet down and their ears up, right? Well, no, says the Darwinians and all. That gets lost too. And so then, what the heck? Let's just be good. And you get the Ethical Culture Society of New York, or whatever, some remnant. I don't know. I just wonder what you think about this.
It is.
You might want to do something with prayer. That was I didn't take too much time to pose this question. But I have to know, I was wondering about this as I was rereading the paper.
Well, I think, too, I thought of while you were talking, too, that some of this defense is not just about, it's defining true religion, but it's also trying to show what it is about the current religion that doesn't seem appropriate, I guess. So I think it's true. It probably is a little bit of a transition. It's moving out of this isn't, I guess in my opinion, it's almost want to say this isn't right. This isn't the way it doesn't seem good to me. It doesn't seem healthy in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And so it's sort of a stripping down to what's left when we take away, the way it's practiced today, or the way people are affected by it, or the emotional involvement in it, or the idea that we've found we know what God is like. You take all that out, and what's left an openness and a humility that we don't know what God is like. I'd like God to be like this, and I'm gonna hang out over here, but I don't really know that for sure. So I guess it is a little bit of a transition.
I'm glad you pulled that slide up there, because if I just walked in and read that last quote there, it sounds like Hume thinks, well, we ought to have maybe even state-sponsored religions, and we want to regulate sympathies and bring about some temperance and order. Do you think that's a representative quote for Hume, or do you think he's sort of speaking to the authorities of his own time? Or do you think, we could have state-sponsored religion as long as it was the right kind? This open-minded, kind of temperate sort of stuff. So I asked a question about Hume, but then also your own views. Could we have state-sponsored religion if this is what true religion is, as long as it's a certain sort?
That's a good question. Well, to begin with Hume, this quote, actually, I have a longer part of this quote. this is only a section of a quote in my paper. Let me pull that, because I thought about putting the whole thing up here. As far as speaking to is, the leadership, or I don't know about that, honestly. Here we go. In fact, this was one of the few places I found where he addressed, the proper office of religion is. Like just a very direct statement that this is, well, here, can I read this with this work? It's not too much longer than this in general. The proper office of religion is to regulate the heart of men, humanize their conduct, infuse the spirit of temperance, order, and obedience. And as its operation is silent and only enforces the motives of morality and justice, it is in danger of being overlooked and confounded with these other motives, meaning all the other superstition, enthusiasm. When it distinguishes itself, religion, and acts as a separate principle over men, it has departed from its proper sphere and has become only a cover to faction and ambition. By reading that, when he says faction and ambition, it makes me, I'm not sure Hume would agree with a state-sponsored religion.
Yeah, I mean, in part it gets back to Doug's earlier question about whether this true religion is just, he doesn't
A way to
ban
say
this,
it,
it's
right,
just,
right.
so he doesn't get arrested or anything
Yeah.
like that. And so, having read it, I was just wondering what your sense of it would be given the philosophy of it, the arguments you've looked at and so forth. But then also yourself, maybe something to think about in the future as to what really this might mean for the relationship between the state and religion.
Well, I think for me, personally, I think any religion, state-sponsored or not, because people tend to be swayed very easily by spiritual leadership, can be dangerous, I think, personally. I think that people are moved by these things a lot, and they want to be right, and whatever may have started as just a state-sponsored religion to practice out of fear and maybe ambition turns into something like this, not healthy.
Well, what if the first commandment is don't take me too seriously?
Yeah, well, no, that's
Right,
good.
or something like that. I mean, could the religion build in temperance?
I like that commandment, by the way.
You have no trouble in our relationship.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like the perfect world. I mean, that sounds nice to think that, don't take me too seriously. I'm going to talk about God. Hope you enjoy it. Take from it what you can. Connect with whatever you... I mean, that all sounds very nice. I don't see that as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Hume, the problem would be that it probably isn't going to resolve the fear. And the fear
Right.
is at the bottom of so much.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
That's so interesting. I mean, that's good to think about. I'd like to think about it some more. Yes?
I mean, maybe this is partly follow-up. I mean, when you read the full quote from the Hume there, it speaks, he spoke of its silence.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like that for him, true religion would be something essentially private.
Yeah.
Sort of my experience, which raises the question, I mean, because then I think that alone would suggest, no, this could not in principle be made some kind of state-sponsored thing, because it's essentially, it can't be made. And secondly, I mean, and that raises the question, to what extent can true religion be shared among, say, a community, or a family, or a community of believers who believe in true religion? I mean, to what extent could this be shared in some sense?
Well, I think just the only thing I can think, I mean, I think of the people I share, a discussion like this with, and nobody leaves thinking they have the solid answer of this is the truth, I know God, and I know how to practice my religion. And, there's an openness about this, I think, that actually allows, an atheist and a Catholic and a Buddhist to share a common understanding that, I don't know, it puts a common ground of openness, I think, if that makes sense. Yes, Tim.
You take issue with making God too human. I wonder if that's not inevitable, insofar as we are human and we see things through human eyes.
Mm-hmm.
At least your average person is going to see God more human than God actually is.
Mm.
And if so, how does that change how individuals should try to live their religious life in a true religion sense, or their humility of some sort? Because I think that's an inevitable quality of any belief there's a God at all, is that you're going to see him through our worldview.
Yeah, I think you'd said that to me one other time, and I think that that's a good point. I do, because I think, I mean, we are human and we work in a certain way, and but I think it also just goes back simply to the fact that, well, Dr. Draken asked me about prayer. I mean, I'm listening to my mom pray today on the phone, and she's talking to God like she's talking, to my brother or something, like we were conference calling. Well, not quite exactly, but you know what I'm saying. Like, she treats God like he's right there on the phone with us, and she figures that this event right here is important to God and important enough to help me get through it. So she's humanized. I mean, just you could call my boyfriend and ask him to come to help me. I mean, so it's put it on a level. But I think the idea I'm going for, trying to dig at, is the fact that that may not be the case. I mean, maybe she can't help but humanize God, but that doesn't mean God heard that. It doesn't mean God cares. It doesn't mean any of that today is helping me. I mean, it doesn't mean that's her idea. And the idea here is that she's open to being wrong, which she's not, but that would be the idea.
Yeah, and so this is an aggressive form of deism, which is
actually, deism ties in. I would agree.
Saying, yeah, maybe not. Is God transcendent? Is that then incompatible with the theistic, maybe even pantheistic way of seeing God? Kind of broadly speaking, in everything. Maybe he's not overly concerned with this, that, or the other.
Kind of a flip
kind
side.
of general sense that's
sort of flip side, you're saying, where you've got the idea of God being everywhere, and then the idea of God really isn't anywhere.
not necessarily in contradiction. If God is the universe,
No, because we don't
pantheists
know.
would say.
I mean, I guess I don't see that because we don't know. I mean, we don't know. How can we know?
Yeah, before I ask my question, I want to point out that you did just equate your boyfriend with God. We're going to have problems down the line. I can see his head swelling as we're sitting here. So, just a forewarning. My question is, I was wondering if you could channel Hume and set him in front of the computer, reading the MSNBC article that I told you about today, about the latest translation of the Bible, and I think it was, I can't remember which one. They looked at the actual Hebrew word that had been translated as virgin and translated it as young woman.
Mm-hmm.
What would Hume think about that? Because the implication is, this impinges on the whole miraculous conception of Christ. How would Hume react to that article?
Well, I mean, I guess I would think, that's a part of a religious practice for a lot of people. And, honestly, I don't know, Kim, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure how he would react to that. I'd have to think about that a little bit.
I just thought it was ironic that it was published today.
I know.
You're talking about miracles.
Maybe. Well, I kind of laughed to myself. I mean, it's going to make a lot of people pretty, PO'd, and really, in the long run, who cares?
Why wouldn't it be Hebrew, right?
Doesn't it? What's that?
What language would this have been out of?
It would have been Aramaic.
But I think they're
that's-
looking at, actually, they're going from the Hebrew translation of it and looking at the translation of the translation. So, and I can't remember the word.
Alma.
What's that?
Alma.
Alma? That's Hebrew?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, and
It can
actually
mean either
someone
young
else.
woman or virgin, but
Right.
it's...
Oh, it can
They
mean either.
originally translated as virgin, and in
You
the
just
new
take it early
translation,
for us.
they were saying
Oh,
that,
how do
no,
I?
it actually means young woman. It could have.
I mean, is this, say, given what he says about the possibility, given the evidence for a miracle, what's the odds that someone just mistranslated something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So the odds are
Well-
actually better it's been mistranslated than there really was a virgin birth.
Right, that's actually exactly right. I mean, some of the arguments for miracles, actually, that's probably exactly how you would answer.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, that's true, because that word think Dr. Trammell went over it in our biblical studies classes, fits best with a woman just before she's married. So she would be a virgin by definition because she's so young, but doesn't rule out a person being married earlier than normal. So,
It translates fairly literally to the English word maiden.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else?
We have time for another question. Any fine students want to try to ask questions? No, you don't have to ask one.
No.
Am I allowed to?
Yeah, oh, sure, you're allowed.
Okay. I have a question. I don't know if it goes along with the agnostic he asked way.
Sure.
Or not. But how would using true religion, how would it like define the differences between like religion, faith, and belief?
Actually, I address a little bit about faith in here, in my paper. Faith, I kept thinking about the scripture that says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's the definition in the Bible. And, faith is like when there's not enough substantial evidence, you still choose to believe. And actually, that doesn't, I kind of even alluded to this in my paper, that's not a far cry off of what we're, but I make the point that faith then becomes a choice in true religion. It's the option of not just faith, but it's faith knowing that. And it is a little bit of a paradox, because it's like faith knowing that I might be wrong in the end. So I don't know if those two things really go together, because really belief is believing something. I have this, but yet, I'm kind of talking about an openness and thinking, but I could be wrong ultimately. And that is a bit of a paradox, and I've noticed that myself. But, I mean, I hope does that sort of answer your question? So they don't quite gel in all clarity. So.
Well, it seems like every single culture, even if they haven't met Western religion, like I think isn't it angelic religion, Arab or Muslim, Christianity, Judaism, they all also believe in some type of supernatural being.
Mm-hmm.
So how would Hume's actually tie that into his argument, or has he already done that?
Well, that's kind of what's going on. It's just the basics that, each one of those religions claim to be the truth for the most, for most followers of those faiths believe they have it. This is it. I'm following this because I'm on the road to succeeding in my religious life because this is the truth. This is how it is. And so this is sort of dismantling kind of all of that, if that makes sense. It's kind of, well, Tim said it earlier, and I think he sort of, it's sort of putting it all together and making it a choice, I guess.
Well, we are out of
Yeah.
time, and as I mentioned before, Cassie gets to go give another presentation to the political science department. So